Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're glad you're here. As we allow attendees a few moments to join our event, we'd like to share some info about the Kentucky SBDC. As the only statewide, nationally accredited program that provides entrepreneurial and business development services, the Kentucky SBDC plays a vital role in the Commonwealth's economic development by assisting entrepreneurs at every stage of their business life cycle. For almost 40 years now, the Kentucky SBDC has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions in a complex and albeit ever-changing marketplace these days. We do this at no cost to our clients, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, who co-sponsors our program. That program is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who partners then with regional universities, colleges, and economic development agencies. We're part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation, including most of the U.S. territories. To learn more about us, visit kybizhelp.com. There you'll find additional resources to help start, fund, and grow your business. To request personal assistance with one of our business coaches, you can visit our website at kybizhelp.com or call 888-475-7232. A recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you later this afternoon. So if you have trouble with the broadcast or you just need to step away, know that you'll have access to the entire recording. I'm Janet Flong with the Louisville Center, one of 12 centers throughout the Commonwealth. And with me today are my cohorts from Louisville, Dave Etkin, our Center Director, and Tony Sears, our Assistant Center Director.
Hey, Janet, how are you today?
Good. It's cooling off a little bit today, I think. Not as hot.
Okay, that's one person's opinion, but
I'm grateful.
Tony, are you there today?
Yes, I am. How are you and Janet doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing really good.
Tony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to both of you. I wanted to say hello to the people that are checking in, and it's looking great, you all. And hi, Mr. McCarl. I didn't get to speak to you earlier. How are you? Okay.
All right, Foster, you might be on mute there for us.
Oh, there we go. So I was just
there we go.
Technology is amazing.
Yep. So welcome everybody again to our Wednesday webinar, and kind of a subject we've been focusing on a lot lately is basically leadership in times of crisis and how you have to kind of lead and keep your teams focused and going forward when you're not in the same room, or maybe you're in a little bit, but times are different. What worked in the past may not work in the future. I'd like to introduce, and I'm Foster McCarl. He is a great leadership coach and business coach, and has been so for about 12 years now. And he's a great problem solver, and being able to implement solutions in troubling situations. But I've been on several boards with Foster, and I'll have to say, Foster, you're one of those guys that as a board works through its issues, you're the guy that asks the question that makes everybody stop in their tracks and think, wow, we didn't even think about that. So it's always a learning experience when I'm in the room with you. So I do appreciate your expertise and what you know. So, but today we're going to talk about teams and how to keep your team focused, and dysfunctions and what makes a successful team, right?
Yep.
So take it away, Foster. Let's learn a little bit about what we can do to keep our teams going.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and share this screen. I think we're good there, right? Good.
Yes, we're looking very good.
Yeah, Dave, thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's funny how you how politically you put that statement that I often bring up questions that make people uncomfortable. There's pause there, but there's
but that's an important talent, And speaking of questions, I forgot to mention to you, I hate to jump in real quick, but you have questions, please put them in the chat, and Tony and I will keep an eye on that. We'll ask Foster at the end of the program, but I'm already jotting some questions down now so that I can be ready for that, where I have some questions of my own to get answered. So go right ahead, Foster.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you everybody who's helping to put this on. Alone by myself would be a difficult enough proposition. With the help that I have, we've been able to kind of hit it. If I go back and forth left and right, I have two monitors, and my video is isolated on one, even though I've got some of the screen on the other one. So just bear with me. And again, with the wonders of technology. So today we're going to talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a troubled team, 6 keys to a winning team. Believe it or not, this is not rocket surgery. So there's no one thing you're going to hear here that is a silver bullet that's going to cure all of your problems. A lot of these issues that come up and solutions to the problems that you might have are things that you may have done before that worked and stopped for some reason. So we're going to carry through. We're on a little bit of a delay, as I've been told, about 25 seconds. So we're going to do the best that we can with this. I don't know about everybody on this call. I think we're up to 51 or something, trying to get over to the side. But all of us have been probably inundated with webinars and Zoom and just so many of these type situations where now, a video is speaking to you on your computer. I want this virtual event to be interactive. So I'm using a piece of software that allows me to do that, but we may have a couple of issues regarding the delay. So I can get real-time answers from you, and we'll just do the best that we can to kind of mull through it. At the end, we will have answers, have a PDF with all the answers and to the questions that we put up here, but I do want it to be interactive. So questions will update throughout this presentation, as you see, and there's lack of involvement. I know, some people probably have me on the side with their email up and they're listening while they're doing something, and that's fine. But if you really want to get a lot out of this, you will go through the process and answer some questions. It's anonymous, which is great. You normally have that opportunity if we're sitting in a workshop together. If anybody, I'm sure everybody here has been in some kind of a workshop where they ask for a raising of hands, and they maybe get alligator arms, but that's it. Nobody's going to jump up and say, "Oh yeah, I'm a horrible leader." So this is a great opportunity for you to be honest, and then you can also relate to other people that are also on this call who are potentially going through the same things that you are. So if you go right now, I suggest that you take your cell phone, and it's just easier that way with having multiple screens. Go to menti.com and then enter the code, the 58281. And as we go along, I'll do the same thing on my phone. As we go along, we will actually have updates on this as they update on the screen. Okay, so 25 seconds from now, you will have gotten this. I'm just kidding. It's probably not that bad. You can also see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's a thumbs up, letting you know either you liked it or you did it or it's working or it's not or whatever. Sometimes there will be a question mark down there, although I know that Dave is also taking some questions. But again, this is going to help me understand how to craft the message through this. So if anybody who may have looked at the description, there's a great quote, and it's been paraphrased, and this may be an addition to another quote that was thrown out there, but the people don't leave jobs, they leave bad bosses and toxic work cultures. And I'm sure that everybody on this call has run into a situation like that or is in the middle of a situation like this now. So I wish I could find a better, higher quality than this, because it's one of my favorite Kinko's commercials. But we just want to take a minute and watch this. It's very short, but I think we can all relate. I absolutely love that. Funny thing, I lived in Los Angeles for about 10 years, and I actually used to play volleyball with Ted, the last guy, the paranoid. And I think it's funny. It would be really nice if we could have that kind of open level of conversation with our employees and team members in general, and people would actually own up to what they are or aren't going to do. So what I do want is just give you a quick rundown of me. I've been coaching since 2006. Prior to being with ActionCOACH, who is a global player in the business coaching game, I worked in a small boutique consulting firm, I guess you would call it, with my father, and we specifically catered to strategic planning within the vertical of mechanical contractors. So there's a lot more stories to tell, but you're not going to really learn a lot about your business by listening to my past. So I've been married since 2013. My wonderful wife, Nikki. I have a 17-year-old, Emma, and a 20-month-old. And I guess after 2 years, you stop doing the month thing. So he'll be 2 in January. And then we're pregnant, 27 weeks pregnant with a little dude. We're pretty sure we're going to call him Connor. So that's not 100%. That's why the question mark's there, but we're leaning towards that. And if you want to do the math, I'm 46 years old. So I've got to continue to stay healthy. Originally from Pittsburgh, and I am on the board of directors for the Bluegrass Center for Autism, which is actually why we moved here, because my oldest daughter is on the autism spectrum. She's high functioning autistic. And we actually found a wonderful program, believe it or not, University of Cincinnati, possibly for her. So we're excited about that. So jump on your phones, and we're going to go ahead and throw the first poll question out there. How many employees do you have? So as we go through this, we're going to get what this is called as a word cloud. So you're going to see there's some solopreneurs, their total number of employees as we go out. And I'm going to kind of talk through this a little bit and try not to take up too much time, but I think it is interesting for everybody to see and to get an understanding of who's in the audience. When it comes down to it, whether you have 500 employees or 200 employees, there are still going to be some of the same struggles, a lot of the same issues that are going to come out have the same level of significance for the individuals that are involved, and a lot of the same solutions are going to come from that as well. So excellent. This is a great, a good cross section. Nothing too big, which is great. Although I think 475 might be the highest. And I think David can let me know later, but I believe that the SBA has a 500 employee limit maybe for what is considered a small business. So it's interesting how many businesses fall into that fold. Okay, so this is a great start. Next question that I have, how many direct reports do you have? And if anybody that has more than 10 employees puts down that same number for direct reports, you probably need to call me. But this is important because we can often get out of our jurisdiction, if you will, especially if we are running the business and had moved up from another area of the company that we used to be proficient in. I'm not saying they need our help, but sometimes we think they need our help. And so we like to helicopter parent. And this goes into some of the other things we're going to talk about with team. So we're going to be a little bit rapid fire as we go, and might be able to run back through as we have this. So far, no more than 10 or 12, which is good. We'll keep our eye on that as we move forward. So when it comes down to your team, so which one describes your team from a leadership standpoint? Are you the one on the left where we've got, the A team, they're solid, open, focused? Are you in the middle where you've got some key players, but you're not sure how to upgrade? Maybe you have a couple of individuals holding you hostage. Maybe you've got a couple of individuals that you're, they're bodies really, and you're afraid you're not doing a real opportunity cost on what it means to keep them. And so that can be scary. And then the last one, nobody wants to admit, it's only a matter of time before your last A player leaves, or somebody might leave and be very surprised, and you'd be left surprised holding the keys that, oh, I had no idea they were unhappy, which comes down to communication, a couple other things that we're going to discuss. So it seems most people, the ones that are solid, open, and focused, are awesome, especially in today's day and age. Unfortunately, one of the reasons that ends up being the case is when all of this started with the pandemic, people started downsizing their teams instantly and furloughing individuals and things like that. And you're not going to get rid of your best people. So it was a little bit easier to cull the weak, as it were. So, but most people being in the middle makes perfect sense. What we're going to talk about that's going to relate to everybody, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. This was written in actually 2002, believe it or not, but it's very simple and straightforward. It's an interesting story. It's actually written as a fictional example of a company, but it really, I don't know, it's a very easy read, I guess you'd say. So we're going to run through this, and we're going to talk about the 6 keys to a successful team at the same time, and there will be some polls in between there. So what I don't want to do is I'm not just going to have a bunch of things on slides. I want you to actually write down things that mean something to you, rather than thinking you have to write every single bullet point down it comes across. Some of them might not be important to you. So just write down the things that spark some joy in you, as I said, but that spark your imagination, that say, this is something I've heard of, I thought about, read about it yesterday. I know it's something that I need to do, and now this is something I want to commit to, or at least look into. So the first dysfunction of a team is the absence of trust. So there are a few different aspects of trust that we need to look at. There are many different definitions of trust, from a relationship standpoint to a business standpoint. I like to look at the 3 levels of trust that seem to work within our businesses. Number 1, there's the kind of predictive trust, and we're looking at there's what they call like deterrent-based trust. So you can trust that people aren't going to break the rules, or to a point they're not going to steal. I trust that my safety is not in question here, and that certain people, that's why people say, oh yeah, I've got trust. So the second level of trust is what we call predictive trust, or knowledge-based trust, and that's when the predictive trust is a little bit easier than knowledge-based when I think about this, because what it means is that I can actually, based on the knowledge I have of an individual, I can predict how they're going to behave when I behave in a certain way. The last time I said this to Bob, he said X, Y, or Z. The last time that I had this conversation with Janet and it did or didn't work out, then this is what ended up happening as a result of that. So I can predict their behavior based on my behavior. That's a different level of trust. The real trust that we're talking about here is vulnerable trust. Okay. Vulnerability within a team. I think that I really like Simon Sinek's definition of a team, where he says a team is not a group of people who work together. It's a group of people who care about each other, which to some, to hear that, you might scoff or think that's a little bit over the top. But when you have a strong, cohesive team that has vulnerable trust, they do care about each other. Trust from a vulnerability standpoint can best be measured when we hear certain phrases. That's probably the easiest way to look at it. Phrases like, I don't know, I'm sorry, I need help, and I don't understand. So if you don't commonly hear those phrases within your teams, you might want to look at what your level of trust is. Because if people aren't being vulnerable, they will not say those things at all. They're afraid for their job. They're afraid they're going to, you're going to be disappointed as a leader or a manager. They're afraid that they're not living up to the expectations. And usually they'll say, I can do it. And they mean I can learn it. Or they just outright lie and see what happens. Hopefully there's not a certain level of lack of trust to that point, but it's really important to look at trust and how it is the basis for all 5 dysfunctions. If we don't have trust, we can't have anything else. And I think we have a question. Let me see if I can. I'll see if I can pull it up because I'm on a different screen over here. Unless there's also a 25-second delay there as well. We'll see if you send it through to David, he may also be able to put that in. So I'll pull up the chat. Somebody says the screen is froze. I guess there's audio stuff. I guess you'll let me know if there's a problem there or if that was just from earlier in the chat. Moving on to the next. So the absence of trust, this is something that you kind of might see within the organization that hopefully you don't, but this is when, an individual will get picked on or pulled out for, being different or maybe trying to mess up the status quo. And that's, again, from the foundational standpoint, it's one of the most difficult things to deal with. So the question I have now for everybody is, does your team have trust? Based on what I just described to you, do you hear those kind of statements coming through? Do you hear certain individuals that seem to be coming to others' rescue, if you will? Or is there a really open and honest level of communication with everybody? And it may not be, you may look at this as individuals on your teams that may have trust and other individuals may not have trust. But if you group it as a whole, they also need to have trust between each other. And a lot of times the no clue answer is very good because it can tell us a lot about how out of touch we are with our employees and our team members as workers. When you say, you know what, I would assume that there's trust that goes on between the teams, and maybe the next level down, if you have larger company that has several divisions that report up to people, you may not know, and you probably shouldn't know on the lower levels, but you should know from KPIs and measurements how people are doing. So most people have trust, which is great, because without that, it's really hard to get it's really hard to get through anything else. So we'll go ahead and move to the next. Conflict. So fear of conflict is the second dysfunction. Wow, nobody likes conflict. Everybody should get along all the time, right? Why would we want to not get along? The purpose behind conflict is not infighting. Conflict is actually necessary because not everybody is in agreement at all times. Whether it be you, whether it be a customer or client that you're trying to work with, and people on their team, they may not be in touch and looking at things from the same perspective together. So the fear of conflict is extremely important. If there's a fear of conflict, people don't speak their minds. And as we go down, the dysfunctions, the absence of trust makes it impossible for people to have positive conflict. So when we look at conflict, I like the description that's used here. Conflict is not fighting. It is open, constructive, ideological, passionate conversation, right? So a lot of us are afraid that this is the scene of conflict, and we want to avoid conflict at all costs. Usually what happens is we have what's called artificial harmony, and it's just conflict avoidance, and nobody feels heard, and there's no trust there. So how could I possibly be honest with you about how I feel or what I think or what my fears are or whether or not I agree with this initiative, or if everybody but me is pushing towards this goal? How does that put me as a person that is afraid to raise their voice and cause potential conflict within the business? So the place that we actually engage in healthy conflict is in meetings. Now, they're not going to look like this. Obviously, this is an example of the fear that people have about going into conflict rather than a healthy exchange of ideas, which we usually don't have. So if we don't have this level of conflict, we can't share our ideas and we don't end up getting buy-in into the process. So When you look at conflict with your current team, is it healthy and constructive? Is it on the edge? You just don't know which way it's going to go, if it's a good day or a bad day. Is everybody faking it? Are they just avoiding conflict? Or are you just afraid to go into the meetings? Or are there certain meetings that you're afraid to go into? Because that happens, and you can have a certain level of trust, but because people don't know how to engage in these conversations properly, they just fake it and avoid it. And that actually causes a lot more problems than just getting it out on the table. I think it's important to look at your role also as a leader in this process of teaching people how to do this. One of the worst things that's probably happened that's rampant around our country and has been for years, we don't talk about politics. And that's fine, especially in forums like this. But because people don't talk about politics, they say no politics, no religion. Guess what people don't know how to do? They don't know how to talk about politics or religion. So as a manager within your business, if people don't know how to talk through issues that they have and dealing with the conflicts in the company and don't have that help from you as a leader to do it, they're not going to know how to do it. They're not going to learn how to do it. So conflict is not when everybody agrees. Conflict is when people feel comfortable enough to speak their mind. I'm so glad to see nobody clicked on Tyler Durden and is afraid to go to meetings, because that would not be what we want within the business or otherwise. Okay, so next, lack of commitment. So if we don't trust each other, we're afraid to speak our mind. If I'm afraid to speak my mind in a meeting or otherwise, then how can I possibly commit to a goal or an initiative within the business? Now understand, commitment does not mean that we've got a consensus where every individual is in the exact same mindset, where they agree wholeheartedly with each other. There are no questions. There are no concerns. What we can do is we can disagree, then commit. Okay. But the only reason that I can do that from a commitment standpoint is because I feel like I've been heard. And that's where the conflict comes into play. When I am supported and willing to enter into conflict to bring my concerns to the table, even if people don't sway my way, because there's trust there and people honestly know how to communicate effectively, even if we don't agree on something, I will actually be more apt to commit to something than simply because everybody else is doing it. And if I don't, maybe I'll get in trouble, or maybe I'll be thought of as less than or negative or something like that, because I'm not committed to the group or to the cause. So weighing in on things and having an opportunity to talk about it is what really gives us a certain level of commitment. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts the next two levels. But if people aren't committed to something, they end up being, maybe they can fake it for a bit. If it's a longer term project, then they're a sprinter trying to run a marathon. And then you get to see it break down at the end because they get tired, or if somebody's covering for somebody else or doing all their work for them again, then their commitment is actually going to waver because there are issues there that they have yet to discuss. So the commitment is when everybody is involved. Again, this is not consensus. We do not have to unanimously agree with every single thing that comes across the table. If we did, there would be a problem. Most likely somebody would be lying, but that is not the issue. We can disagree and still move forward and commit to the goal, as long as everybody is heard. So what percentage of your team is committed to general goals, specific goals, the outlook of the company, specific things that you're doing, initiatives that you have? A lot of times we don't really know the easiest way for us to know if people are committed, obviously, is for goals to be achieved. There are some people that have maybe a better idea because they have the inside story on some people that they'll do what they need to do, but they're not really committed to it. They're just doing it because they have to. That doesn't mean we have to be happy about the fact that not everybody agrees with us, especially after we voice our opinions and concerns in a meeting. But there is still an opportunity there for us to grow together and make sure that people feel heard and respected in the process. That's what really gets the commitment going. So we've got 22 people answering, so less than half. So most people have more than half, but not everyone. I don't expect 100% to be committed in all cases. It's good that we've got 4 that are 100% committed. I would imagine maybe some of those are solopreneurs or have a small team. So the idea is we don't put up with people who aren't committed. I don't have the time to deal with it. You know, we're a small business. And so if you're not committed, there are other opportunities for you. And it's unfortunately a great time to hire. So 25, we'll let this go another minute because I think it's important to see where this is. And there's also a possibility that maybe we don't really know. We've got a decent sense of that, the level of commitment, but we're not really certain about what it is and where people stand. Okay, so without commitment, we cannot have accountability because we can't hold people accountable to something that they haven't bought into, right? Accountability is, it's usually one of the areas that's of our clients that we work with that is the #1 area for growth and opportunity for growth. There's kind of 4 steps that I like to go through when I talk about delegation or moving people towards a goal or an initiative, especially if they're underperforming. And this is one way that we hold them accountable. So the first step in getting people on this road of accountability, you've got to make sure that they understand explicitly and clearly what the goal is and they agree with it. What that means is in order to hold them accountable, you actually have to have a conversation with them. Doesn't mean that, when I talk to clients, they say, well, I said, did you talk to them about the goal? They say, well, yeah, I sent them an email about it like 2 months ago. Very strong, definitive. I said, well, did you have a conversation with them? They said, no. Well, then how do you know there's buy-in? So if they don't have that commitment, then it's not going to be possible to hold them accountable. The second thing that we have to have whenever we're actually trying to get some duties pushed on or new initiatives started or trying to delegate from a certain point, if you're a CEO or a manager who's taken too much on your own plate, so you've got to make sure to give people the tools necessary to be successful. Whether it's a piece of technology, whether it's an individual, maybe they need an assistant, maybe they need somebody to work with them in the process. There are tools technologically, systems, processes, and people that we can actually provide in order to achieve the goal that we've agreed upon. The third thing to push us towards accountability is making sure that people have the knowledge, the know-how, and the capacity to utilize the tools from the previous step. If you give somebody who has never managed anyone before somebody to work underneath them and don't give them continued training or work with them on how to manage somebody properly, it's a crapshoot. You're lucky if they know how to do it instinctively, but usually there's going to be some issues depending on the individual that works for them. Maybe that individual has managed up before and they know how to handle these things. In addition to that, maybe they need some additional training on software, tools, processes, systems, something like that would support the second step. The last thing that you need in order to properly be able to hold people accountable is the actual item of accountability itself. Usually this happens in meetings. I prefer at the beginning ongoing weekly meetings, but they've got to be attached to a KPI a key performance indicator or a key prediction indicator, or something within a scoreboard or a dashboard that you're utilizing with the individual to help benchmark things as they move forward. The reason why most people don't delegate or have difficulty turning things over to their team is they either abdicate it completely, and then they only find out there's an issue later on down the line, or they delegate a little bit, but they don't set up benchmarks to help them kind of mediate their pace through the process of the project or initiative that they're trying to achieve. So the accountability is something that's very gray. It's very cloudy. When we have regular meetings, weekly meetings with these individuals, usually no more than 30 minutes or so, to review where they are. Is there anything you need from me? How can I help? And then move on and give them the support that they need. Then you know you've got them on the right track. That's the actual aspect of accountability that's difficult. Sometimes you can get away with having not having a weekly meeting and just referring back to a shared scorecard or something like that, or KPIs. But in order to truly hold people accountable, once they're committed to the goal, you have to give them the tools and then revisit those on an ongoing basis with them so they feel your support. And that's where people actually turn those fingers around and point them at themselves when there's an issue there. But people want to avoid accountability. When you think about accountability also, I don't want you to think about, although I used the term earlier, of holding somebody accountable. That's kind of forceful. It sounds like a wrestling move, but we don't want to hold them accountable, and we don't expect them to be accountable to the boss, the leader, or the individual that oversees them. Accountability is something that somebody takes on in this situation in a group form. So when I'm truly accountable as a teammate, I'm accountable to the individuals that are also on my team and myself. I'm not being held accountable to standards from somebody who's in the back office that I rarely see or talk to unless I cause trouble or get into trouble or don't achieve my goal. Then I hear from them. That's not true accountability. That's more fear-based. And that's not really helpful in the process of helping somebody really own their actions and position within the business. So as a leader, because surprise, surprise, that's what this all comes down to, what areas do you see the most growth opportunity for you based on the things that we just talked about? So agreeing on a clear goal, if that's something that you don't do, so we call it a growth opportunity instead of a challenge. It's just easier to stomach that way. Providing the tools for the success. Maybe you're not actually giving them the tools they need. You're hoping they'll figure it out themselves. You may struggle with giving them the knowledge, or you may struggle with the accountability. So setting up KPIs, setting up regular meetings, working with them and always throwing that out. How can I help? Not jumping in and saving them, but how can I help? I'm going to spend a couple extra minutes on this one because I think it's very telling. I want everybody to see where other people stand in from a leadership standpoint in areas that they need to grow. Again, agreeing on a clear goal, it's agreeing and it's a clear goal. Providing the tools, that makes sense. Accountability is usually the biggest one, where I'm not having regular meetings, or if we do have those meetings, we're not having clear, concise conversations about these things. And intertwined through this conversation, you hear a little bit of solution as well as just pointing out opportunities where we're not failing as a company or a business, but that we need to shift. So by my watch, we have about 20 minutes left. We've got 18 people on right now. So one of the biggest ones, which is not a surprise, is in accountability. Each one of these provides a certain opportunity for the individual that you're working with to exit out of the process. If they don't have the tools, they're out. Or mentally checking out, if not actually checking out. If they don't understand the goal, then they're just kind of droning on. If they don't have the knowledge, then they're just wasting time and money and their own efforts and energies. And again, if accountability isn't there, people just really aren't They're not being helped. They're not being led. As a leader, you have one job that I always tell people. I said, there's one thing that you need to focus on above and beyond everything else, and that is leadership development within your team. That is it. Your job is to develop leaders. Okay. So here's what it looks like overall. Again, the 5 dysfunctions. The inattention to the results is the last part of the 5 dysfunctions. Now, people might think that they're results focused or their individuals are results focused, but the inattention, sorry, I'll get back here so you can see the top level. Inattention to results. People say, oh, they're results. People focus on results. My team focuses on results, and I'm sure they do. Everybody's got to focus on some end game. But the result, what result is the question? What result are they focusing on and why? As the next slide shows, inattention to results means that inattention to results as far as the group is concerned. And individuals, such as the eye here on this gentleman's forehead, can often point towards people that are results based through goals that are ego driven. I'm not going to say those goals won't also benefit the company. They could, but a lot of the issues that come up with the prior steps and within those can actually come from the fact that people are so ego driven and I driven in their goals, that they're not looking at the goals for the company or for the team. Or if they are looking at those goals, they're a much smaller percentage than their focus is on how that goal is going to affect them as an individual. My future, my resume, how am I going to be seen with the amount of work that I've done in this situation? So you have to be very careful in having the certain level of trust that you can have an open conversation with somebody about what they're actually trying to do and why. What are they trying to achieve and why? And that's why team KPIs are just as important as individual KPIs. Sometimes an individual's goal or key performance indicator may take a back seat to a KPI that's driving the business forward or actually going to help the team a lot. So having that certain level of accountability allows you to help drive people towards team results. Even though you have individual meetings with them, as we mentioned in the last step, you can still have team results. So what best describes your team's focus on company results? Is everybody on your team focused on company results first? Most of them? Are there, a few team players, but most of them are acting as individuals, and you can see that. You might get lucky if you have a few team members that have a larger impact, like in sales and things of that nature. Or the last one, which is scary but true, and a lot of times it feels like the inmates are running the asylum. They're showing up at work. They may be putting in all the time and all the effort, but you're not exactly sure to what ends they're working towards. They may not be focused specifically on the goals that you've got in front of them. They may be coming up with their own. Okay, so I know we still have this delay on. I don't want to wait too much longer, but keep populating these, and hopefully I think when I go off it might go. I was joking that we should make this a 2-hour session. Don't worry, we're not going to do it, but that would give us time for the 25-second delay for every single question that comes through. So I don't have to cut it off. Because that might be the case, and that might be why we're getting about half the responses that we normally would. But this is still telling and very helpful. Most importantly, I want everybody here to see how these answers relate to them in their situation, that you're not alone. Okay, so the top 2 learnings so far today. I do want to take a moment for this. What are a couple of things? And one of the words that we use is the word BFO, which stands for blinding flashes of the obvious. So this may not be something you've never considered before. It's just maybe you're seeing it in a different light. Maybe you're seeing it in a way that you can apply to your team differently than you had before. So I want you to take just a couple minutes and write out the top 2 learnings. Make sure that's showing up. Okay. And you can answer more than once. Okay. And then as these populate, they'll run up through and we get to see everybody's learnings. Unless there are so many learnings that you can't quite keep your finger on, or can't just pick 2. If you can only pick 1, that's fine. Yeah, that's a really good one. Being honest with the team, you're actually doing more harm than not when you're not honest. I like to say that when we do communicate, honesty without compassion is verbal abuse, but honesty with compassion and thought is actually very helpful and curing and medicinal for a team, because we're not doing anybody favors by not telling the truth. But yeah, communication, very, very important. I love the fact that it all comes back to trust in the bottom level with all this stuff. Accountability. Yeah, and the great book. So as I showed before, I think you can see it there. Yeah, so it's a very easy read. And they actually he has a test in the back of it, which is nice because it allows you to kind of gauge your team a little bit. And like I said, it's a very easy read. It's not a boring business book. It's kind of it's almost like a novel. You want to see what happens at the end of the story and for the company. So leadership development, very good, very important. The pyramid conflict is good in a team. Accountability is important. Yeah, leadership development, our number one concern, no matter what. And the people underneath us, their number one concern is also leadership development. There are 1,000 things that fall underneath that, but we want to keep that as a priority. Okay, so now we've got 13 minutes to go over the 6 keys to a successful team. These are actually going to be faster. They're kind of easier and a little more straightforward. But there are also some questions in here, so we'll try and keep up as best we can with the delay and keeping it on there too long, but shouldn't have any issues. So the number one key to a successful team is strong leadership. Anybody on this call right now who's trying to improve themselves, that's an extremely important telling sign of strong leadership. Not knowing everything. As a business coach, I'll make maybe a shameless plug, but business owners that come to us for help and coaching, it really says a lot about their level of humility. Leadership, as far as people leading from the front, not the rear, is something that we show them. But when we try and seek outside of ourselves and our little business bubble, what we can do and what we need to achieve, it's really necessary in order to truly show our people that we are good leaders, that, hey, I am always trying to improve myself. I'm not going to keep adding another year onto all my years of experience as the reasoning and why I'm superior in this position, because I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been doing this for 30 years. That's not enough, because what got us here won't get us there. It might keep us here, but it also might tie us down. So strong leadership also involves a willingness to grow and not know everything. So which best represents you? Would you consider yourself a leader, a manager, or an operator or technician? Sometimes we swing in more than one direction. Sometimes our businesses, do call for us to jump into operator and technician seats to a point. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a healthy awareness of why we are doing what we're doing, and not just jumping in and coming to a week later and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been in the technician seat again, all this time. just having an awareness of that is extremely important to the process. And I'm glad that we've got a lot of leaders on here. Some of the leaders might be upset that we're not showing their names. They might not want this to be anonymous. The good leaders like that. But sometimes when we don't have things consistently set up in our businesses, we swing to managers and operator technicians. Of course, if we're solopreneurs, being an operator or technician kind of comes with the territory to a point, but we also have to segment our time. We still need to lead within our own businesses of one. Excellent. Good to have so many leaders on here. Okay, the second key to a successful team is a common goal. We mentioned it earlier about the commitment. A common goal is something that we as a team are focusing on. When we look at a common goal, a goal setting, and I want to read this because I read this, I think it was yesterday, the day before, in the Harvard Business Review. A goal is when a leader defines visionary goals that are strategic and emotionally compelling. So when we're talking about goals in this sense, it's not talking about, you have to make that many widgets come off the line, or you have to pull through at this percentage. I mean, those things obviously have to happen in order to turn a profit and be productive, right? And operate at capacity. But it's really important to note that we want these larger strategic goals to be something that the team has a common interest in, and that they are emotionally compelling. A difference that you want to make as a result of having success in the business is different than a goal of having success in the business. Especially as we've heard probably ad nauseum when people were talking about millennials, and a lot of that issue is a question of purpose. What is the purpose of our business? What are we doing? My purpose and what I do as a business coach is to change lives. Now, that is a result of all the things that I do in leadership and organizational development, marketing and strategic planning and communications, and all those things are seemingly more tactical when you compare them to changing lives. So make sure that everybody understands the common goal of the company and the business so they can get involved. So does your team share a common goal? Or the common goal for the company? Do they know what it is? And does everybody agree on it? Sometimes it is very difficult to know. In today's day and age, literally with the pandemic and everything that's going on, there shouldn't be an issue with agreeing on a common goal necessarily, but sharing and knowledge of that common goal is a big part of this. One of the things that we find as coaches that is most impactful on every single business, every leader, and every team simply comes down to communication. We're not sharing information. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the last minute or so. Okay, so most people, they share a common goal. It's about 50-50 for whether or not they know. If you don't know, chances are they don't. The problem with voids in information is that people fill them. I often joke that one of the biggest problems that teams have is that they make stuff up and then they believe it. And that happens with goals. It happens with people's opinions of them. It happens when you don't have regular performance reviews. They make up what they think should go in that void. Nobody leaves it blank. So if they don't know what the common goal is, they're probably putting their own answer in there. I'm not saying it's bad, but it may not be the answer that you as the leader want them to have. So, okay, number 3 of the 6 keys, they have to know the rules of the game. How do we communicate? Who is in charge of what? What are the processes that we follow from step A to B to C? And how are we going to come out at the end of this based on the scoreboard that we're looking at? So there are certain rules. If you don't have rules, you can't possibly expect people to operate well together, because the only way people are going to understand if they've crossed a boundary is by crossing it. Now, we can't have a rule for everything, and we don't want to be, I often use the example, like in these situations with rules, we don't want to be naked, but we don't want to be in a straitjacket. We want to wear our rules as kind of a loose flowing garment that opens up with the communication that we have with each other, but to not discuss them until there's a problem, or until something goes off the rails, or until somebody complains their way up to you. That's not the proper way to explain the rules and get everybody on the same page with that. So they have to know what we're doing, how we're getting where we're getting once we've determined what that common goal is. So for you and your business, are the rules of the game known and shared by all members of your team? I like the last one, that I wish I knew with any certainty, because a lot of times we don't, or I'll think they know until somebody comes and complains to me about something that somebody did, or an issue, or I didn't know the vacation policy was X, Y, or Z, or there can be issues there that people just simply aren't addressing, and you don't know until someone's feathers get ruffled, because we never put out ahead of time what the specific rules are. Okay, so we got about 14 in here. We got 4 minutes left. I'm going to jump forward. I'm sorry again, the delay is probably keeping some people from jumping onto this. So 4, you've got to have an action plan. An action plan, those 2 words, that's hence action coach, right? It's not talkie coach, it's action coach. There's an action plan. There's not a talking plan or a planny plan. Those are fun when you have 3-ring binders full of information that are up on the shelf. So when it comes to a plan, it has several elements. It's got deadlines. It's got individuals assigned to what that plan is. It's got benchmarking. One example we use is we actually have, well, we used to have it on site. Well, we did recently, actually, when they opened things back up, but we have a 90-day planning session, so we can actually get a written action plan for a minimum of 3 goals for the next 90 days. It's an action plan, because if not, if you don't plan it out, it's an idea that turns into a dream, and that doesn't make sense. So we like to make sure that there's an actual written plan. So when it comes to your plan, if you do in fact have one, so when describing your plan, which of these does it fulfill? Is it updated? Is it written, first of all? Because if it's not written, it's just something you talk about or have ideas about, that's not going to work. Is it reviewed regularly? Does it list people responsible for tasks, deadlines, etc.? And is it accessible to everybody? And now we have about 2 minutes left, and I know we're really cutting down on people's ability to check in and see this with a delay. But we can see by this, one of the areas that we need to focus on most is putting deadlines in the middle, in the meat of the action plan, not just by the end of the year, we're going to achieve X in revenue. Great. Well, what about, the next 6 months, each month, each week? What are our revenue goals? Are there deadlines for that? Are there deadlines for the action items to support that? Okay. Support risk taking. Man, it's a great visual. So when it comes to supporting risk taking, I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to run through this real quick. There are some keys to supporting risk taking. Number 1, listen. Number 2, ask questions, and then go back to number 1 and listen. It's very important for people to be heard when you're supporting their risk taking, so you understand what they're trying to achieve and why. Help them position themselves for success and to create a plan. They say, oh, I want to try this. All right, good luck. And then help pick them up later on. Make sure to set meetings to review their progress, just like you would in the accountability step earlier, and conduct postmortems, whether they work out well or not. So you can help them to feel comfortable in the fact that they just took a risk. We only have about 1 minute. So if you want to kind of jump in real quick and say, when it comes to your team taking risks, I'm helpful, I help them every time, I support them all the time, or do I not? And if that stays up for a minute, that's great, but I do want to hit this last one. This is extremely important. You have to have 100% involvement and inclusion from everybody on your team. You can't have one outlier who's not participating in everything. Usually, if you go back to the dysfunctions, that's somebody who's not heard and not really part of the team. And I think we're just about out of time, so we'll skip through that. Again, is everybody involved or not? Just ask yourself that question on those last two. Do I support risk-taking, and is everybody involved? And then just running through the 5 dysfunctions, you know where to find some more information about that. What we just ran through in the 6 keys. And if you can take a minute and just write the most valuable takeaway from today, I just want you to have like one actionable item that you can take back and apply in your business with your team, something, just one. It's kind of like reading books. Like, I'm not too concerned with how many books you read. I'm much more concerned with what you apply from what you read. So if everybody only gets one thing out of today, that's the most valuable takeaway, what would that be? Trust issues, clarify team goals. Clear goals, very good. That's extremely important. And you can do that, or if nothing else, you can just ask them, are the goals clear? What do you think our goals are today? And they may or may not know. They may have no idea. Oh, that's too bad the internet doesn't play well with Webinar Jam. I guess that's a takeaway. Not what we were planning. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, I could sit on these forever to get as much input from everybody. But again, David, I know we're out of time. We're on a delay. What I am going to do is I'm going to fast forward the eval. I'll put that. If anybody wants to reach out to me for some clarity on these, or if you have questions, a lot of times specifically, we didn't have time to run into specific questions on team issues. Everybody has a sore thumb or something that they have an issue with, a person they don't know, or maybe they're sitting next to that person watching this. You can reach out and call me. I will be happy to sit down and talk to you about any of your issues, or help you any way we can. So sorry, I'm about 2 minutes over, David.
So
back over
so Foster, we can take a few questions if you have time to hang out a little bit. If you guys out there have some questions, make sure you stick it in the chat there and we'll get to it. But that was a fantastic session there. I really appreciate what you did. That was awesome. I really appreciate it. Good stuff. But I have a couple questions, and I noticed that especially there was a number of folks that said they were managers, not so much leaders. And so I had a question from somebody that says, can a leader take a great employee and turn that employee into a bad employee? And I guess the other part of that, which they didn't ask, was, well, if that's the case, what do you do about that?
What do you do? Okay, so the first thing, the first line that we usually see where a decent employee becomes a bad employee is the employee themselves. For a leader to turn a good employee into a bad employee usually starts with the trust issue that we talked about before, and a true lack of honest communication with them. Usually it's that they're not upfront or asking them and listening to what their concerns are, what they're trying to get out of their position, or problems that they may have in the office space. And then it's a lack of adjustment from the leader that will turn that employee into, quote, a bad employee, or maybe a disengaged employee, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It says when you mentioned on the trust issues, especially regarding in a meeting, and you're afraid to say things, how do you start to change that dynamic?
The first thing is, don't go in there and rip it off like a Band-Aid without anybody knowing. And then if you leave this on your desk and people see it, like, oh, they're gonna what? And just come in there, and it's kind of like if you go away to a Tony Robbins seminar or something like that, and then you come back and you're all on fire for change, but nobody else is in that. They're still in the old fishbowl. You've come out of the clean water, back in the dirty water. So the first thing to do would be to open up conversation with them and just ask questions. it's really important to ask the right questions. As a business coach, one thing that we do with our clients, we actually turn them into coaches. Coaches ask, consultants tell. So when we teach them to ask people the right questions, then actually listen to what's going on, that opens doors for how they can begin to handle this conflict. But yeah, it's not something you just launch into right away. You probably have a good idea of who's having difficulties within your business and who's got trust issues. The first thing though is that if you don't have that level of trust, you can't possibly manage conflict well, no matter how good you are at it, because people aren't going to be honest. They don't trust.
Yeah. And I guess when you were putting the 5 dysfunctions up, that they were in a pyramid. So if you're going to work through your organization, I assume you would start at the bottom. I mean, is there a specific process that you would recommend somebody walking through to kind of scan their situation and maybe make some changes?
So there's a couple things. What I like about what Lencioni does in his book is he actually goes to one. He starts in trust, and then I believe he actually jumps up to results, because we're usually not sure what we're aiming at, right? So I think the last one is probably one that we could do out of order, or at least take a look at what those results are. But we can't expect people to change their focus on the results necessarily without having those other levels. So I always would start with number one. Without trust, you're going to be chasing your tail, and you're going to be having having dishonest conversations with people, or they won't be honest with you because they don't feel like they can trust you. So from that point, you would build up from the bottom. You can identify that last step, David, those results that you're focusing on, but you can't really go in and change them or do anything with them without the support of the prior 4.
Mm-hmm. That's great insight. And I guess just a segue on that, you mentioned that part of a strong leader has common goals, or has a common goal in their team. So what's a good way to develop that? I mean, it's not in strategic planning, or is it part of the Simon Sinek's why you do what you do, or what's your thoughts on that?
So there's a couple different things. The common goal that I was discussing today is a little bit more broader and a bit more visionary. And other goals. So I like to use like vision statements and mission statements. I like to explain those as kind of like a backboard in basketball. I can shoot a free throw without a backboard, but it really helps if I have it. And sometimes I really need to use it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with a vision statement and a mission statement. You can operate your company without one, but it really helps you make lower level goal decisions if you have one. And sometimes you really need to use it when an opportunity comes up or a problem arises within the business, and you're not sure whether to follow the opportunity or fight the problem until you look at what your mission and vision is in that larger common goal of the business. Then you can see if it actually fits. Well, yeah, we don't need to do anything on the West Coast, or why are we hiring somebody in this position when that's not even an area we want to focus the business on? So the common goal is a little bit broader, but in all situations, people have to understand what those goals are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. So here's a question. So I guess from a manager standpoint, we may be leaders, but we may have a leader above. How do we manage up?
Managing up. So first thing, and I didn't get a chance to talk about this, so you can reach out to me if you have any questions about this. One thing that we use, and it's not just us, but we use DISC assessments. Some people use PI, some people use some different assessment tools. But the first thing that we do, whether we're coaching the CEO, which is primarily what we do, the owner, but sometimes we actually coach the owner and the C-suite or leaders and managers underneath, we utilize DISC. So the individual that we're working with in this case would be the leader or manager or next level, when they have to go through 3 kind of steps. Number 1, know thyself. So you have to understand how you communicate first and foremost. Number 2, you have to know others. So then you'd have to know who that person that you roll up to, how they communicate, because we practice the platinum rule, and the golden rule is you treat others the way you want to be treated, right, David? But do you want to be treated the way I want to be treated? Probably not. I wouldn't expect you to. So why would I communicate with you like that? So what we do is we need to make sure that we understand our communication style and the other person, so we can practice the platinum rule, which is communicate with others the way they want to be communicated with. And then the last step after knowing yourself and knowing others is begin to enact very small, specific strategies consistently that are going to add on to the communication within the relationship. And it's really just testing and measuring how that works.
Thank you. Awesome. Tony, you're there. Do you have any questions? I'm taking up all the time here.
I'm used to it. So actually, I don't have any questions, but I did want Foster to know that he's been getting a couple of accolades over here. Vanessa Jackson says, thank you so much. And then Teresa Whitfield says it's a great workshop.
Excellent. I just
totally
hope
agree.
that people aren't going through this saying, "Oh man, another one of these." Like, I don't, not you guys in the SBDC, just in general, we sit through so many of these that I just like to be a little bit different, a bit more interactive, so people can have a different experience.
I will say that I've read the Dysfunction book, but I mean, you had a great spin on it, and I really had some good takeaways. So I really thank you for this.
Excellent.
So
Thank you.
We don't have any more questions. I guess we could say goodbye. Anything out there, Tony, before we let's see.
Actually, I do. It says Angela Bartley. She says, I would like to know what the disrupting questions you would ask in meetings.
I'll bet you would.
Which get people
you want me to do all the work?
Which people
for you?
get
No, I'm just
interested.
kidding.
Okay.
I think you shoot me an email, and maybe we can discuss a little bit further, because the disruptive questions have to be done with care, and they're going to be dependent on the struggles and challenges and makeup of the group. So I could throw out a disruptive question, and in the wrong group, it's going to do more harm than good, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but there is no just kind of blanket, this is what we do. It's a process.
Yeah, and I will say the meetings I've been with you, Foster, that when you throw that out there, you know, it's always in a very inclusive and positive way, and it's not accusatory, and it's just, you know, it makes everybody stop and say, oh yeah, aha, and it's really valuable. So as I said earlier, I really appreciate when you do that. So keep it up.
Really do appreciate that, and it's been a pleasure being on with you guys today. Again, I hope the process we used and using Menti kind of worked out. I know that it might have been a bit of a struggle time-wise for some delays, but I really appreciate everybody hanging in there. And I expect then to send out to David the PDF with the results that we got from the Menti questions, and then you can send them out to everybody, and we'll go from there. And again, if anybody has any other questions, deep digs or personal questions that they want some assistance with, you can go ahead and call me or reach out to me via email.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, Foster, thanks again. Thank you, Tony, as always. And so later on today, you'll get a copy of this webinar, and we'll send you the PDF that Foster's going to produce for us. And hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. And have a good day today, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.